I'm not sure I should be making this video. Some things on the internet were never meant to be exposed. Behind the apps and screens in the United States, there's a darker layer. Real crimes, hidden networks, and once you see it, you just can't look away. Welcome to the dark side of the internet in the USA. On the night of April 14th, 2009, Boston felt ordinary, busy even. Inside the Boston Marriott Copley Place, guests were settling in after dinners, conferences, and late meetings, moving through the halls with the quiet routine of people who believed they were safe. That illusion ended just after 10 p.m. A woman's scream echoed through the upper floors of the hotel. Sudden, sharp, unmistakably desperate. Seconds later came 3 loud bangs, each one heavy enough to stop conversations mid-sentence. Some guests froze. Others tried to rationalize the noise, but deep down something felt wrong. Moments later, the front desk received a call. A young woman was lying face down in the doorway of room 2034. She wasn't moving. She looked dead. When hotel security arrived, they stepped into a scene that didn't feel real, even to people trained to handle emergencies. The woman was wearing only her underwear. Her wrists were tightly bound behind her back with plastic zip ties. Blood soaked the carpet beneath her body, spreading outward in dark, uneven patterns. She had been shot multiple times. One bullet tore through her hip. Another passed through her lungs. A third struck her heart. But the gunshots alone didn't explain the damage. Her skull had been fractured in several places, beaten repeatedly with blunt force, likely from the same 9mm handgun used to shoot her. This wasn't a quick killing. This wasn't accidental. This was violent, deliberate, and intimate. Scattered around her were personal items that felt disturbingly out of place: a Gucci purse, a cell phone, a spent shell casing, and a New York ID card. The name on it was Julissa Brisman. Paramedics rushed in and did what they always do: CPR, oxygen, urgency, hope built on muscle memory. She was transported to the hospital, but by the time she arrived, there was nothing left to save. Julissa Brisman was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. She was 25 years old. She would have turned 26 in 10 days. Julissa was small, just over 5 feet tall and barely more than 100 pounds, but the evidence told investigators something important. She had fought back. There were bruises on her wrists, marks on her body, signs of resistance. Even in her final moments, she didn't give in quietly. She had been trying to rebuild her life. Julissa was a former model and an aspiring addiction counselor. For years, she had struggled with alcoholism, a battle that had led to hospitalizations and fractured relationships. She knew shame. She knew relapse. She knew what it meant to disappoint the people who loved her. As detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the hotel, one image stood out. A tall blonde man wearing a baseball cap and a dark jacket appeared on camera around the time of the murder. His face was partially obscured, but his build, posture, and movements were clear. One officer recognized him almost immediately. Just 4 days earlier, another woman had reported a terrifying encounter at a luxury hotel in Boston. She had been robbed at gunpoint by a man she met through Craigslist, and her description of her attacker matched the man in the footage almost perfectly. At that moment, the investigation shifted. Julissa Brisman wasn't the first victim. On April 10th, when Tricia Leffler, a 29-year-old escort, met a man at the Westin Copley Place Hotel after connecting with him through Craigslist. Her ad promised time with a sweet blonde, and he responded quickly, arranging a meeting within half an hour. Leffler was experienced and cautious. She insisted on meeting him in the lobby first, where she could observe him in a public space. He was tall, well-built, calm. Nothing about him immediately raised alarm. They agreed on a price and went up to her room. The moment the door closed, everything changed. He pulled out a gun. He bound her hands with plastic zip ties. He demanded money. She complied, showing him where her cash and gift cards were hidden. He took what he wanted, then did something unsettling. He put on gloves and accessed her phone, not to steal it, but to erase his number from her call history. Before leaving, he searched her belongings and took a pair of her underwear, stuffing them into his pocket. He restrained her to the door handle with more zip ties, gagged her with duct tape, and walked out. The entire attack lasted less than 15 minutes. Leffler survived because she stayed calm, because she waited, because she managed to free herself once she was sure he was gone. She contacted security and police immediately. At the time, no one knew how close she had come to dying. 2 days after Julissa Brisman's murder, the same man struck again, this time in Warwick, Rhode Island. Cynthia Melton, an exotic dancer who advertised on Craigslist, met a tall blonde man wearing a baseball cap at a Holiday Inn Express. Once inside her room, he pulled a gun, forced her to the floor, and restrained her with zip ties. He tried to gag her, but she fought him fiercely. Eventually, he stopped trying and told her not to worry, that he wasn't going to kill her, that he only wanted money. This time, something unexpected happened. Melton's husband, who was nearby, entered the room. The attacker fled immediately, abandoning the assault and disappearing before he could finish what he started. Now investigators had 3 crimes, 3 victims, 1 suspect. The man captured on surveillance footage was Philip Markoff. He was 23 years old, a second-year medical student, clean-cut, tall, well-spoken, engaged to be married. Markoff had grown up in a small town in upstate New York, where he was known as an exemplary student. He excelled academically, participated in clubs, and was widely viewed as someone destined for success. But as the years passed, something changed. In college, he became withdrawn, isolated, emotionally distant. He spent long hours alone, struggled socially, and appeared increasingly depressed. By the time he reached medical school, he was deeply in debt, overwhelmed by pressure and living a double life. He gambled obsessively. He accumulated massive student loans. He frequented explicit online forums, and eventually, he began looking for victims. Markoff wasn't caught because he was sloppy in one single way. He was caught because he underestimated how much of himself he left behind. Emails, IP addresses, surveillance footage, disposable phones that weren't as disposable as he thought. When police searched his apartment, they found everything: the gun, the zip ties, the duct tape, the clothing seen on camera, and a disturbing collection of women's underwear hidden under the bed. The image of a future doctor collapsed in an instant. While awaiting trial, Markoff attempted suicide multiple times. On August 15, 2010, the date that would have been his first wedding anniversary, he succeeded. Using his medical knowledge, he cut into major arteries, ensuring there would be no rescue. Before dying, he wrote 2 words in his own blood on the wall of his cell. One was the name of his former fiancée. The other remains unexplained. With his death, the trial never happened. The full truth was never spoken in court. But the evidence left little doubt. Philip Markoff wasn't a mastermind. He wasn't invincible. He was a man unraveling, hiding behind appearances, until violence became his escape. And Julissa Brisman paid the ultimate price. In December 2004, Lisa Montgomery committed one of the most atrocious crimes in U.S. history. She ripped a baby from its mother, a baby that had not yet been born, still inside her womb. The victim was Bobby Jo Stinnett, a 23-year-old dog breeder who was 8 months pregnant with her first child. Along with her husband, Bobby Jo bred dogs to sell and earn some extra money. It was a different time. Breeding and selling dogs was something completely normal back then. Bobby Jo lived a quiet life with her husband, the typical life of a young family in a small Midwestern town. She spent a lot of time online, especially on a forum called Ratter Chatter, a website where rat terrier breeders and enthusiasts gathered to talk about their dogs, report lost animals, and clear up questions about the breed. It was on that forum that she met Lisa Montgomery, a 36-year-old woman from Kansas who claimed she also bred dogs for sale. Montgomery introduced herself under the alias Darlene Fisher and pretended to be pregnant, which naturally created an immediate bond with Bobby Jo. The 2 women became virtual friends. Over time, after exchanging emails, they agreed to meet on December 16, 2004, under the pretense that Lisa wanted to buy a puppy. That afternoon, around 2:30 p.m., Lisa Montgomery arrived at the Stinnett home. Bobby Jo knew she was coming, so she opened the door without hesitation. Without saying a word, Montgomery immediately lunged at her. As she struggled with the pregnant woman, she pulled a rope from her pocket, wrapped it around Bobby Jo's neck, and tightened it mercilessly until Bobby Jo lost consciousness. At that moment, Lisa committed one of the most horrific acts a human being can commit. Without anesthesia, with Bobby Jo unconscious, she grabbed a kitchen knife, lifted her victim's shirt, and slowly began cutting open her abdomen to remove her unborn daughter. The worst part is that Bobby Jo briefly regained consciousness during the attack. She tried to fight back, but she was too weak. Lisa grabbed her by the neck and strangled her until she was dead. Montgomery then pulled the premature baby from the uterus, carefully cut the umbilical cord, wrapped the infant, still alive, in a blanket, and left with the baby in her arms. And all of this happened without anyone knowing what had just occurred. But why would Lisa Montgomery do something like this to a first-time mother? Lisa was severely mentally disturbed, and her childhood had been nothing short of hell. When she was just 3 years old, she slept in the same room as her older sister, who was repeatedly accused by the babysitter while Lisa watched. As she grew older, she began suffering brutal abuse at the hands of her mother's boyfriend. The violence escalated to such a degree that her stepfather built a separate room next to their trailer so he could lock her inside and assault her without interruption. He didn't just accuse her sexually, he also suffocated her with a pillow and slammed her head into the floor over and over again during the assaults, causing irreversible brain damage. This went on for years throughout her childhood. You might wonder, where was her mother in all of this? She was far from a good parent. When she discovered what her partner was doing to her daughter, instead of reporting him or protecting her child, she grabbed a gun, pointed it at Lisa's forehead, and screamed, "How could you do this to me?" as if Lisa were to blame. Over time, her mother not only allowed the abuse to continue, but actively facilitated it. She let her boyfriend's friends come over and use her daughter as a sex object, satisfying their most disgusting fantasies, while she watched and enjoyed it. As if that weren't enough, Lisa was also beaten regularly, forced to shower with scalding hot water, and whipped with sticks. But perhaps the cruelest moment came when her mother, purely as punishment, killed Lisa's small dog, her only friend and source of comfort, right in front of her, beating it to death with a shovel. What happened in that household was pure barbarity, and I could spend hours telling you everything Lisa endured as a child, but it's better to stop here. Fast forward to 2004. At the time of the crime, Lisa was pretending to be pregnant. She told everyone around her that she was expecting a baby, even though it was medically impossible, because she had been sterilized after giving birth to her fourth child. The most disturbing part is why she did this. She was terrified that her new husband, Kevin Montgomery, would leave her if he found out she could no longer have children. And what was her solution to keep him? Steal a baby from another woman's womb. Bobby Joe's body was discovered shortly after by her mother, Becky Harper, who found her daughter lying on the floor in a pool of blood in the area where she cared for the puppies. Becky described the scene to 911 as if Bobby Joe's stomach had exploded. Paramedics rushed Bobby Joe to the hospital, but at 4:27 p.m. that same day, she was pronounced dead. From that moment on, the investigation focused entirely on finding the newborn alive. Police searched Bobby Joe's computer and found email exchanges and forum messages with Darlene Fisher, in which they discussed meeting on the day of the crime. This was the first real lead. Investigators traced the account and identified the IP address, which led them straight to one place, Lisa Montgomery's home in Melbourne, Kansas. When officers arrived, Lisa came out holding a newborn baby. It was obvious this was the stolen child. She claimed she had given birth at a hospital in Topeka, but no such records existed. At that point, police began to understand exactly what had happened. They searched her vehicle and found key evidence, including directions to Bobby Joe Stinnett's house. Everything fell into place. Once arrested, Lisa didn't take long to confess. The evidence was overwhelming, and during interrogation, she admitted to the murder and the abduction of the baby. The trial was complex due to Lisa's severely damaged psyche. The defense argued that she suffered from mental disorders and that her actions were the result of insanity. However, the evidence showed that the crime was premeditated, not a sudden psychotic break. In 2008, 4 years after the murder, Lisa was found guilty of kidnapping resulting in death, a federal crime punishable by death. In April 2008, she was officially sentenced to death by lethal injection. Over the following years, her defense filed multiple appeals, arguing that her history of abuse and mental illness had not been properly considered. All appeals were denied. Finally, after more than a decade on death row, Lisa Montgomery was executed on January 13, 2021, at a federal prison in Indiana, becoming the first woman executed by the U.S. government in nearly 70 years. Without a doubt, the dark side of the internet in the United States operates on another level. And Lisa is not the only woman capable of unspeakable acts fueled by mental instability. Years earlier, another disturbing story unfolded, one involving a woman who also hid an entire world behind a computer screen. Sharon Lopatka appeared to live a normal life, but she harbored a secret not even her husband knew about, extreme fetishes that she shared only online. On the morning of October 13, 1996, she left a note, boarded a train, and never returned. Days later, her body was found buried in a stranger's backyard. The most disturbing part? Everything suggested it was something she wanted. Sharon Lopatka was a 35-year-old woman living in Maryland. She was married and ran several digital businesses. She spent most of her time on the computer, promoting her services, and slowly descending into the darkest corners of the American internet. She began browsing erotic forums, chat rooms, and websites, discovering new desires and fetishes, each more extreme and bizarre than the last. Eventually, she started offering content herself, writing fantasy texts, responding to emails, and creating material for others who shared her interests. Little by little, she immersed herself in increasingly extreme communities. It was as if the internet had unlocked a part of her sexuality she never knew existed. Online, she adopted a new identity, calling herself Nancy Carlson. She started in BDSM chat rooms, but her interests soon shifted toward darker forums, focused on extreme fantasies, absolute domination, humiliation, abuse, restraint, suffocation, and even murder. She wrote things like, "My greatest fantasy is to die at the hands of a man who is aroused by my suffering. I want to be used until my body can no longer take it, and I want you to enjoy it." I had never felt this kind of desire until I started writing about it, and now I can't stop. In those spaces, she found a place where she could express things she never shared with anyone else. Her husband had no idea what she was doing online. For months, she searched for someone willing to act on her fantasies. Most people thought it was just roleplay. Some blocked her. Others went along with it, but never intended to make it real, until she met Robert Glass. Glass was a 45-year-old computer technician, married with children, who also lived a double life. He used the alias Slowhand and participated in extreme fetish chat rooms, where he had already exchanged disturbing messages with other women. But with Sharon, it was different. She was persistent, direct, and fully committed to doing it for real. This wasn't a momentary impulse or a sudden act of passion. Sharon and Robert spent months talking and planning their meeting, discussing every details of how it would unfold and how much she would enjoy surrendering completely, even anticipating her own death. On October 13th, 1996, Sharon boarded a train from Baltimore to Charlotte, fully aware that she might lose her life. Before leaving, she left a note for her husband, Victor, telling him she would not return and begging him not to search for the person responsible. She assured him that even if her body was never recovered, he should know that she would be at peace. When she arrived in Charlotte, Glass picked her up at the station, and they drove for about 2 hours to his trailer in North Carolina. From that moment on, the encounter they had planned began. 3 days of madness, fulfilling the most horrific and bizarre fantasies imaginable. On October 16th, Sharon's ultimate fetish was fulfilled. She died by asphyxiation while having sex with Robert. At that time, no one knew what had happened, not even her husband. After reading the note, Victor waited several days before going to the police. Confused and desperate, he began searching Sharon's computer, where he discovered everything: the emails, the photos, the forums, and the fantasies of the woman he loved. On October 20th, 1996, he reported her missing and told police everything he had found on her computer. Investigators uncovered more than 800 pages of emails between Sharon and Robert Glass. Using that information, authorities traced Glass to North Carolina. On October 25th, they searched his trailer and found Sharon's belongings, ropes, harnesses, bondage equipment, a .357 caliber revolver, CP content, and Sharon's body buried about 75 feet from the trailer. Glass was arrested and charged. Prosecutors initially charged him with premeditated murder, but in January 2000, a plea deal was reached. Robert pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 36 months in prison. Cases like these show how the dark side of the internet and the United States can slowly destroy your mind until you begin to enjoy extreme, aberrant, and even cruel things. Another example occurred on December 31st, 2016, when a disabled teenager was kidnapped by a former classmate and later found wandering the streets of Chicago, disoriented, barefoot, bloodied, and covered in signs of abuse. The most sickening part? The entire ordeal had been live-streamed on Facebook. The victim, whose name was never released, lived in Crystal Lake, a suburb northwest of Chicago. Although he was 18 years old, he had the mental capacity of a 5-year-old. He was kind, innocent, and suffered from developmental disabilities and schizophrenia. He was extremely vulnerable and trusted people easily, especially those he considered friends. That trust made him an easy target. He agreed to spend some time with Jordan Hill, a former classmate from a special education high school. And by special education, we're talking about students with disabilities, behavioral issues, and criminal backgrounds. Putting someone like Jordan in the same environment as a severely disabled teenager is like putting a tiger and a lamb in the same cage, but that's how some education systems operate. From the victim's innocent perspective, the relationship seemed friendly. Jordan used that trust to lure him in. On December 31st, 2016, Jordan invited him to spend New Year's Eve together. He told the teen they would eat at McDonald's, talk, and that he would be home the next day. The parents agreed and dropped him off at a McDonald's, where Jordan was waiting. The teen got into Jordan's car without hesitation. That was the last time his parents heard from him for 3 days. Jordan didn't take him home. Instead, he dragged him around different parts of Chicago, sleeping in a van Jordan had stolen days earlier. Despite everything, the victim didn't resist. His condition prevented him from fully understanding that something was wrong. He trusted Jordan. He believed he was with a friend. Eventually, Jordan took him to an apartment on the west side of the city. Inside were 3 more people: Brittany Covington, her sister Tanisha, and Tesfaye Cooper. The teen didn't know it, but he was no longer a guest. He was a prisoner. As soon as he walked in, they tied him up, gagged him, and began torturing him with chilling indifference for 3 days. On the afternoon of January 3rd, part of the abuse was live-streamed on Facebook for about 30 minutes. Dozens of viewers watched as the group laughed, while physically and mentally destroying a completely defenseless person. The video showed the teen bound, screaming in pain as they kicked him, cut his scalp with a knife, forced him to drink toilet water, burned him with cigarettes, and made him shout phrases like "fuck white people" and "fuck Trump," humiliating him for being white. All of this while they smoked marijuana, drank alcohol, and treated the live stream like entertainment. The victim, schizophrenic and unable to understand why this was happening, could only cry, scream, and beg. Imagine it. A disabled teenager, confused and terrified, wondering why his friend Jordan was doing this to him, when all he wanted was to celebrate New Year's Eve and eat McDonald's. By that time, his parents had already reported him missing. He was supposed to come home on January 1st. 2 days passed with no sign of him. On January 3rd, just hours after the live-streamed torture, the teen managed to escape. No one knows exactly how, probably while his captors were high and careless. Barefoot, injured, and completely disoriented, he wandered the streets of West Chicago until someone saw him and called 911. Police quickly realized he was the missing teen reported days earlier. Within hours, authorities located the apartment and arrested all 4 suspects without resistance. Jordan Hill, Tesfaye Cooper, Brittany Covington, and Tanisha Covington were charged with kidnapping, aggravated assault, unlawful restraint, vehicle theft, and hate crimes. Brittany Covington received 4 years of probation and was banned from using social media during that time. A complete joke of a sentence. Tanisha Covington was sentenced in April 2018 to 3 years in prison. Tesfaye Cooper received 8 years, as did Jordan Hill. And like in so many cases, the sentences were absurdly light. I still don't understand how people who kidnapped and tortured a disabled teenager can receive such short sentences. If the boy hadn't escaped, he would almost certainly be dead. And that's it for today. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you'd like me to explore the dark side of the internet in a specific country, leave it in the comments. The comment with the most likes will be the next video. Thanks for everything, and I'll see you next time.